Welcome to our Health Flash this week. Topic of the week is regarding allergic reactions, but I'm going to focus on membranes or barriers. My first experience with an allergic reaction was at the age of 11 when my father bought me a new watch. It was a beauty. A few days later, I noticed my wrist was getting a little itchy. A little bit red. I took the watch off. I could see I was irritated. Oh well, I'll just clean it a bit more. But this pursued. I eventually had to change from a leather strap to a synthetic. Years later, as I was studying in school, I was reminded of a reaction like this when it was allergy classes, and I brought the issue up to my teacher, and he says, well, let's take an opportunity here and discuss your particular responses that might be involved with such a reaction. So first of all, it was a leather wristband, yes. Well, what do we know about leather and tanning and processing and chemicals? And how interesting, one of the chemicals that's used in the processing of leather is nickel. So now we're looking at me. What do I have that could be an area of nickel involvement? Well, one of them was the amalgams from the fillings that I had from the dentist. They're silver amalgams, but they do contain nickel and tin. So that was one thought. And the teacher says, well, let's pursue that a little deeper. What other areas would you be possibly involved with nickel? And I really couldn't come up with anything until one of my friends said, well, you know, you're playing in one of the bands here. You play a trumpet. I wonder, was there anything involved with that instrument? And sure enough, when we dug into the mouthpiece material, there was nickel in it. And I was basically sucking on that mouthpiece for about 4 years prior to getting that watch. Was that for sure? We really can't say for sure, but I knew that once I took a remedy for nickel, I didn't have any trouble after that. So there's a first reaction as a young boy going into this world of allergies and getting some form of information, and then continuing further as we did our classes. My teacher was very careful in saying, let's be really considerate of our protective layers. And he says our main protective layer is the skin. And he says, now, class, I want you to rest a little bit, take it easy. Think of the skin on the outside of your body, but all of a sudden follow it into your mouth, down your food tubing, and out the other end. He says this is not the true term for guts. That's some made-up word. It's GIT, gastrointestinal tract. So it should be, hey, I had a git feeling about that instead of a gut feeling. We refer to this tract as inside, but really you can see it's a continuation from the outside of the skin through the mouth to the anus. I like to call this our juicer, just like you would use the kitchen juicer to separate the liquids from the solids. Now let's consider the skin continuing through the nose and the throat into our lungs, and then relating back out to the external environment. This is our filtration system. The git uses specialized enzymes to process our food. The lungs use nitrogen and oxygen from the air to refresh our blood. That makes these two organs classified as external, not internal, unlike the heart or the liver, which are considered internal. These membranes from our skin, through us, the git and the lungs, protect us from inhaled and ingested allergens. Each has a specialized lining and defense mechanisms to deal with the outside elements. Here comes a very interesting concept. These specialized linings receive their seeding, as if to plant a garden with seeds. These seeds are developed in the human body from mother's milk. This is the anti-allergic miracle. That miracle is called colostrum, the first fluids that comes through the mother's milk and continues for a length of time. This is where we seed our guts and eventually our lungs to protect ourselves from the outside world, whether we breathe it in or whether we eat it in. This is where our immune system begins and for the rest of our lives protects us. Did you get a good start? All right, let's start eating and breathing. And let's start inhaling pollutants and ingesting chemicals, because it comes down to that word. The common denominator is chemical, whether it's a natural chemical from the earth or a chemical formed by a process in a laboratory or a factory. There are certain chemicals, when formed, that become highly reactive or volatile. They are nicknamed the cloud. Perhaps like walking into a swimming pool and a blast of chlorine hits you in the face. Or maybe you're cleaning your sink or your floor and you're using chemical cleaning agents, going into the lungs and also into the git. They're connected, remember. The most highly volatile chemical with a cloud, and a cloud's called an aromatic. So aroma, such as the smell of fresh bread being cooked in the morning, aromatic. These groups of amino acids, some of them contain a unique electrical charge which increases its activity. It's called benzene, a 6-sided carbon ring. When combined with other compounds, these particular types of compounds can produce incredible reactions in our membranes. So what I've done just to make things a little easier today is the phenolic aromatic compound, the chemicals common in air and in food both. I just short formed that to PACs, PACs. Phenolic aromatic compound, PACs. Inside the human system, the immune system, when a PAC is encountered, we're going to call on a supporter. And for the sake of today's talk, we're going to pick on just one supporter in the immune system with a nice name, immunoglobulin. Short form is IgE. IgE. IgGE is just a nice way to remember it. IgE is an immunoglobulin, and if a pollutant bumps into IgE, he releases histamine and leukotrienes and other substances into the bloodstream as a defensive mechanism. If we look just to the intestines, the battle is often in the trenches, the subfloor. There is a lining in the subfloor of the intestines with the name lamina propria. Interesting, lamina like laminations, propria, I guess one could say appropriate for dealing with these first line of antigens. We secrete around 3 grams of this IgE a day. This IgE antibody is capable of mopping up bacteria, viruses, toxins, and food antigens. He has at his hand a 20-protein complement system to deal with the guarding and the destroying these antigens. This system removes the end products of the antigen. And if all goes well, we're fine. We didn't feel anything happen. In came the antigen, a chemical from food or a chemical from air, or as in myself, a chemical from a wristband. We can remove them. However, if the defense system is weakened, an antigen can produce a 3-phase response. First response, such as the runny nose, sneezing, coughing, that's an immediate hypersensitivity. If it's in the skin, it might be an itch or a rash. If IgE, the immunoglobulin, cannot do the job, he'll call upon a major basic protein to activate another powerful cell called eosinophils. They're part of the white blood cell system, and they're designed to deactivate the invader. In order to do that, their reaction is much stronger, and there will be an immune response. Not just the runny nose, the sneeze, or the cough, but a chronic condition, immune-wise, known as asthma, or if it's on the skin, it could be called eczema. If still more help is needed, meaning there's a chronic invader, a chronic chemical that's being involved in your system day after day, then along comes leukotriene C4. And for those of you who understand the term C4 in the military area, that's a bomb. And so leukotriene C4 comes to aid in the 3rd stage and acts as an explosive to blow up the invader. Unfortunately, this action can also shut down the liver valves, constrict the bronchioles, plasma will leak, the blood pressure will fall, and now we have an emergency. This emergency is known as anaphylactic shock. The body is near death. Emergency intervention is needed, perhaps an EpiPen or a rush to the emergency room in the hospital. So 3 different types of reactions. Basically an acute, maybe a moderate, and then a severe. So first of all, immediate hypersensitivity, then immune reaction, and then anaphylactic shock. All 3 of these stages are dealt with by our immune system and in response to a chemical, which I have called it the phenolic aromatic compound. These 3 responses will be remembered, and the next time an invader shows up, the reactions will speed up. When memory cells circulate, sometimes they find antigens that look like invaders. Here's a good example. There's a certain protein in birch tree pollen that looks very similar to a protein in celery, apples, peanuts, and kiwi. So you could have somebody with quite a reaction to peanuts and not really knowing what's going on, and then ending up in a birch tree pollen area. And when Iggy attacks, we have a case called cross-reactivity, where the body starts now looking at the proteins found in the peanuts as though they were a pollen. Being a bit confused, Iggy brings in his second helper, and now we have an immune reaction. It can be dramatic, and it can be delayed, often several days after exposure. There's no one cause for disease, as there is no one cause for allergic reactions. The crossing, or what we'll call mimicking, of some chemicals to the natural chemicals found in foods can create those 3 steps of allergy reaction. Those who suffer it have to deal with either the first stage, hypersensitivity, the second stage, often called the disease stage, asthma, eczema, etc. But the third stage, the anaphylactic shock, is so serious that even restaurants and food stores have to advertise that they will have peanuts or shrimp essence possibly in their food. Let's take a look at a PAC, a phenolic aromatic compound, one of the chemicals found in food and air that cause allergy reactions. It's called gallic acid. Those who react to it suffer nose and sinus congestion, ringing in the ears, low back pain, isn't that interesting? Sugar cravings, hyperactivity, behavioral problems, and attention deficit disorder. Oh boy, now that's gallic acid. What is that? That's a phenolic aromatic compound. It's a chemical. Some of them are natural, some of them are man-made, some of them are in the recycling area of our chemicals. There's over 3,000 of these chemicals added to the cleaning and the food industry every year. To me, it's just recycling, because where else are you going to put it? Another one of these reactors is called acetaldehyde. And it can create sensitivities, so that person is very, very multiple sensitive, and perfumes or petroleum products cause their second phase reaction, the immune reaction, and it is very disarming. The tongue can swell up, the throat can close. Psoriasis is associated with another PAC called melvin, chemically named anthocyanide. I find that word quite interesting. I see cyanide in the last part of it. Let's take an example of a diet that's high in processed sugars and fats and processed starches. Yeast infection. If a yeast infection converts into a fungus infection in the GIT, remember this is not the gut, this is the gastrointestinal tract, there is a PAC, a phenolic called salsolinol, which is a product of fermentation in the gut, and this can lead to extreme cravings for alcohol and chocolate. Alcoholic and chocoholic. Cross-reactivity with another PAC called chlorogenic acid can expand those symptoms into the head, the ears, the nose, dizziness, headaches, numbness, and tingling of the extremities. And how interesting that one of the foods that contains the chlorogenic acid is honey. Sometimes people will have a source of honey and end up with some funny feelings, numbness and tingling in their extremities. Another PAC, big long name here, get ready, phenyl isothiocyanate, can induce muscular dystrophy, diarrhea, heart arrhythmia, hypertension, high blood pressure, and thyroid dysfunction. So what do? You avoid those foods, well, 80% of the time, there's a universal reactor found in that food. Not just one pack, but many. These are chemicals. So it's not fair to blame the packs for everything. We wouldn't be able to eat anything at all. Another aspect to the packs is their connection to the neurotransmitters in the brain. I've been kind of dissing these packs all along with this talk, but there are natural occurring packs that give us the ability to transmit messages in our brain. They have the good sides. It all depends on how well our membranes handle them. And our skin is a fantastic membrane through our gut, through our lungs, the skin of our outside body. But there's also another membrane called the blood-brain barrier. Very selective in allowing what goes into the brain. The brain is a very, very gregarious, aggressive user of glycogen, blood sugar. And blood sugar that comes across will contain the packs. If there is a reaction in the brain-blood barrier, and some of the packs, and again, I'm talking on the good side, packs that are called serotonin, tryptophan. You've probably heard these words before, but not thought of them as a substance that acts as a neurotransmitter to send messages. Low levels of serotonin and tryptophan are associated with a syndrome known as Tourette's syndrome, obsessive-compulsive disorders, sleep disorders, PMS, migraines, depression, bulimia, attention deficit disorder. Again, we're talking about low levels of the good packs. So it's not that there's bad and there's good and there's a distinct line. They're all part of the chemical nature that we have, and science has brought names to these things. Should our lung, intestine, or skin membranes become compromised, the reactory substances are used as a defense mechanism. The most common reactive substance for protection is called mucus. Okay, you can call it snot or phlegm, but mucus is a good thing. It traps, grabs the invaders, it keeps the tissues hydrated, and aids in motions of the human body, such as in the gut, the gastrointestinal tract, the motion called peristalsis, the wave that's produced after your stomach does its twisting and torsioning and sends a wave of muscular contraction that moves the waste materials all the way out through your body. Lung cells, they look like skyscrapers. 90% of their volume can be produced into mucus in a split second to the reaction of an allergen. Lungs don't have muscles to move them, so they depend upon the diaphragm to expulse the extra mucus. Herein lies the conundrum for our lungs, our intestines, and our skin. This is the conundrum of the three parts, lungs, intestines, and skin. What do they share? They share this mucus. Then along comes the dreaded event, dehydration. Without the liquid part of our body, we can't produce the mucus. It dries, it clogs up, it hardens. Dehydration leads to leaks in our membranes. And if you think drinking water will take care of it, I suggest you think again. Water does not rehydrate the body. We are not a water body, truly. We are a salt water body. Just taste your tears or your sweat. Salty. Our membranes need salt water. Now the interesting part here is I don't think it's a good idea to walk down to the ocean and try and drink the salt water. It's not prepared the right way. We must prepare it through our body's processes. This salt, which we use, comes from our diet, from the earth, or from fish, and then we process that through in our body into a special form of salt that mixes with calcium. Yeah, I said that, calcium. You think of calcium for bones and teeth and that, but it has a tremendous part to play in the transmission of nerve signals, and the nerves have liquid in them. This is something that not a lot of people really have heard before. Nerves are not like wires, like electrical wires that you see for hydro. Nerves contain a protective sheath called the myelin sheath, but inside the nerve is a liquid, given the beautiful name axoplasm, as in nerve liquid. This axoplasm is on a conveyor system that moves at 1 millimeter per 24 hours. Imagine that, from your brain to your baby toe. That conductor system, which is how many centimeters long, moves only at 1 millimeter per 24 hours, meaning it's constantly in conveyor system. However, the messages that are going from the brain to the toe on the myelin sheath, they're upwards of 285 meters per second. So we have this nerve conduction system with liquid inside, which really is our living substance. And this is what's transferred to the cells. The cells pick this up, and inside the cell is the living substance called cytoplasm. Cyto as in the liquid, where all the elements of the cell continues. So we need salt in our diet, the proper salt, and that salt is a calcium. Eat your veggies, eat your veggie roots. The salt that we have available for prescription is produced by the Biotics Research Lab near Houston, Texas, and we use that for our rehydration programs. The corollary to the salt is another delivery system in the fluid mechanism of the body, which keeps us lubricated in our moving parts, called oil. So I'm not talking 10W30, we're talking fish oil or flax oil or borage, the oils that come from the land or from the earth. You combine that oil with the proper calcium salt, your skin is rehydrated, whether it's in your outside skin on your body or whether it's the outside continuing to the tubing, the git, or into the lungs. It all requires salt and oil in order to maintain its flow. One of the situations that is devastating to that process is the dehydration in the gut, known as a leaky gut. Leaky gut would be like tiny holes in the radiator of your car, and you're constantly overheating, dehydrating, and then having to replace that water. Well, that's where antifreeze comes in. And the EFAs in our world, the 3, 6s, and 9s, the fish oil, the flax oil, etc., those are our antifreeze. We cannot maintain our temperatures without them. And in order for our nerves to flow and for our saltwater body to maintain its waterproofing, we need the calcium from our soil. So to protect ourselves from the PACs, the phenolic aromatic compounds, the chemicals that can induce the allergic reaction, I'm going to nag you a little bit. Now here again, we're just using a 3-symbol made-up word, N-A-G. That's nag. I'm going to nag you on the main ingredient that makes up these membranes. So we've got the PACs. We'll call them the troublemakers. They are natural. They are chemical. They are made by the earth, and they're made also by man. A proper restoration of the lining will maintain the integrity so that we do not overreact to them. The nag is called N-acetylglucosamine. Let's just use the last word, glucosamine. Gluco, sugar, amine, amino acid. Oh, okay. Sugar and amino acid. Amino acid just means protein. In fact, in the early days, when microscopes were invented, and old Dr. Leeuwenhoek was looking into the pond through these specialized lenses that he made, he could see creatures moving about. Well, it didn't take long to go, hey, let's take our microscope to the human body. And the first element that they could see was called a vital amino acid. Knowing that amino acid meant protein, and they were vital, that the body had to get these into themselves in order to continue life and continue at a sustainable level. So they called them vital amino acids. Well, time passed, and the word acid was dropped. Now we've got vital aminos. Then the O was dropped and replaced with an E, vital amine. And then the L was dropped and vital became vita amine. And then they dropped the second A and it became vitamin. And that's where the word vitamin comes from. It's a amino acid, it is a protein, and without it we simply cannot sustain our physical body. So inside the term glucoamine, we have the protein and we have the sugar. The brain uses blood sugar. Please, I'm not talking about processed white sugar. I'm talking about the sugars that the body produces from our diet. NAG is the protection for your membranes and keeping your allergic reactions down. The lab that we use, Biotics Research, has developed a specific formula combining several different ingredients to deal with the different membranes in the different areas. Remember, we're talking skin, we're talking lungs, and we're talking the GIT, the gastrointestinal tract. Each of those shares the need to have the membrane protected by this particular type of glucosamine. They put it into a product called IPS, which is their identification for the doctors, intestinal permeability. We don't want the membrane to be permeable to the allergic reactions, or it gets into the bloodstream. If that gets in the blood-brain barrier, we've got some of those things we talked about with obsessive-compulsive disorders, Tourette's, terrible things that can happen. If we protect the lining, whether it's the lungs or the GIT or the skin, our membranes are intact. IPS, intestinal permeability support, containing the ingredient NAG. That's for the GIT and the lungs. The membranes for the skin are the salt and the oil, as we talked about. The salt is CalMag-Zyme, and the oil is optimal EFAs. Those are the maintenance programs. Those are the protections for allergic responses. If it's too late and the person develops an anaphylactic response, very, very difficult to change those systems around, because those parts of the immune system have become so defensive against them that that person carries along an emergency kit. Let's just say that we have an exposure to maybe a camping trip, and you're out in the trees and somebody's got an issue with the pollen, then Biotics produces what we'll call a natural antihistamine, and they give it the name Histoplex, histo as in histamine and complex, and that can be used for emergency treatment if a child, say, is having a really difficult time. It has to be dosed quite regularly, 4 every 2 hours on an empty stomach until there's relief, and then 4 2 times a day for a further 12 days, because as I mentioned before, some of these reactions, especially if they're crossing over with the food and a pack, can be delayed for several days. A further method to deal with it is to have frequencies embedded in a patch worn on the left shoulder to help direct the lymph system to control the reactions. So today we talked about packs, we talked about NAG, we talked about membranes, we talked about reactions that come in 3 different steps to those allergies. We even talked about my old nickel allergy, which was quite a relief to find out after all those years. I always had to wear a synthetic band, even today. I protect it. So what we'd like to do later is take this allergy type of reaction away from the GIT, the lungs and the skin, and move into the air. And this is electropollution. Allergies to electropollution are now being scientifically documented. And this is a concern when you've got your cell phones, you've got the microwave, the TV. This has been spoken about for many, many years, but it always takes many years before enough evidence comes on board to start saying, hey people, get your landline back. Don't put that cell phone against your head. Get protection. And we're proud to say that with our BioApps company, we do have protections for the cell phones now available. Thank you for attending. I've been really enjoying these. I hope you're having a good time. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate. Call in to us and let's get some education going here. Thank you very much. Goodbye.